Welcome to Kellogg's Global Politics. I'm Anita, and I'm here with my co-host Ryan.
Thanks, and glad to be here.
Trump and Netanyahu agreed this week to a Gaza Peace plan. How much should Trump be lauded for the deal, and will Hamas sign on? Trump was also busy bailing out his friend, Argentina's President Javier Milei, announcing a $20 billion bailout of the economy. Was this deal really necessary, and will it be enough to lift Argentina out of its economic woes? Finally, we discussed the growing popularity of far-right policies and the MAGA foreign policy supporting these groups. But first, Ryan tries once again to convince me that aliens have visited Earth. How about it?
Man, one, I think that introduction is unfair.
Why?
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily visited Earth.
Visited the airspace of Earth.
Yeah, like the actual physical alien or the drones that they sent, the autonomous drones. Does it make a difference to you? Or you doing the typical like dismissal of little green men from Mars visiting Earth is
I'm definitely
laughable.
dismissive of green men visiting. But yes, I don't think alien technology has visited Earth either.
Okay. Well, that's fair. That's fair. But unlike you, Congress has been taking this very seriously since 2023.
They have nothing else to do, like government shutdown or any of those.
No, it just shows you where their priority is at. And for one, if this Congress is going to focus anywhere, I think this is okay focus area. I think if they put all their energy in this, this is pretty good.
I like them to reopen the government too, but.
Yeah. Once they do that, but then afterwards, I think 100% focus on this because it's fun. One, two, keeps them out of trouble.
I'm still going to disagree.
It could lead to trouble.
Well, just that there are other things that would be nice for Congress to do.
Yeah, in theory. This Congress, though?
I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So just to bring us back to kind of where we're at and the UFO discussion. So this was first brought up within the House in July of 2023. And at that time, and we talked about it briefly, this really vaulted UFOs or UAPs into mainstream kind of viewership. This involved the ex-Intel officer David Grush alongside a handful of different Navy pilots. And Grush, of course, the big headline coming out of that was he alleged that there was a secret crash retrieval program and non-human biologics. So the little green men had been captured, which the Pentagon has refuted, but still that testimony really kind of galvanized Congress to action. So they met again on September 9th. And so this is actually the third meeting that the Oversight Committee has had around UAPs. And this was also kind of a follow-up because Congress formalized the reporting and analysis through the Pentagon's All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, so the AARO, which required regular reports to Congress. But the big thing that came out in March of last year was that this office, so the AARO Historic Review, said they found no evidence of U.S. possession of extraterrestrial tech or reverse engineering of the program. So that wasn't received real well by the UFO community. But to the credit of the Pentagon, the AARO, this is all on older historical, so stuff going back to like Roswell and things like that. And they said that they had like huge gaps in the data, so that doing a proper analysis on all these incidences. And they also didn't make any sort of assertion on all the modern ones. So basically everything that's been presented in congressional testimonies to date. So that left then hope for the UAP UFO community that this is still being pursued. So what happened on the September 9th meeting is you had, again, military veterans come presenting evidence about the incidences, during the course of their career. Probably the one that was most noticeable in terms of the visualization was kind of the Dylan Borland, who talked about and I think this was 2013, actually at Langley Air Force Base, after doing, I think because he was basically kind of a drone support operator supporting troops in Afghanistan. And he came out of Langley, and he said they witnessed a giant, basically it was like several stories long, triangle-shaped ship.
Sure.
And why are you so skeptical?
What would you do?
I mean, we think about it. I mean, we talked about this before with Grush and kind of his claims. I mean, what's your motivation then? You're in front of Congress. Grush particularly. This guy.
Oh, I think they believe it.
Yeah. So, I mean, are you just saying it's a gigantic mental break that causes them to hallucinate in kind of similar ways? That's what explains the similarity of the descriptions of like alien craft or aliens or things like that.
Well, I mean, the similarity can just be like you hear about things and then I think you see them, but I think what you're actually seeing is something that looks different, right? Like your eyes are tricking you, which is easy.
Well, how do you mistake a aircraft that's like 2 stories tall, a gigantic triangle with hugely bright lights that then like disappears or like zooms up, that defies all laws of physics? Because this is what the testimony, everybody can go watch, the video of the testimony. It's like a 2-hour video of the hearing. But yeah, he describes in vivid detail of kind of his encounter with this craft. And then a lot of this is about when they attempt to do any form of whistleblowing or reporting around it, it's usually like the end of their careers.
Right.
And that's where Congress is really focused on establishing a system, one, that protects whistleblowers around these activities. And because a lot of it is...
got rid of whistleblowing for harassment and stuff.
Right,
so
yeah.
But we are going to have
we're going to protect people because that's what their constituents are interested in.
Right, okay.
And I think we can all agree that's inherently interesting. So we do want to...
More important than being able to claim sexual harassment.
Now, it's not an either or. I don't think we should discourage transparency or whistleblowing wherever it's embraced.
Well, Hegseth just did. Anyway, back to I don't know what they see or what their motivations are. I think there's just not enough evidence.
No, I think that's very much the case. And a lot of what this is... I'm
going to need to see real evidence.
Yeah, and that's very much what this is established as sort of legal framework in which... if whistleblowers are protected and then there's resources provided for the proper data analysis of whatever is recorded or whatever sensors pick up. I think what was unique and what made like all the headlines was this video that was leaked out by to Representative Eric Burleson. And he played this footage. It was a picture of a MQ-9 Reaper drone off of the coast of Yemen on October 30th, 2024. And the clip shows a Hellfire missile striking this bright, fast-moving object that then keeps on flying. And Burleson described it as the missile is actually like bouncing off of this craft. Now, it could be explained in a variety of different ways, and I sent you like the link to Reddit. Now, under the subreddits, under like military and Air Force, these are people like working in these conditions. They actually said, this looks like a Mylar balloon or some sort of balloon where it's actually struck it. But of course, the missile doesn't explode because it's a balloon. And then you can see like parts of it flying off. So there's definitely skepticism of it. Other people see different things. But it's really about, there's all this unexplained phenomenon. The military is historically, and again, it's hundreds of pilots over the decades that have witnessed these things. And they're usually dismissed or they're punished if they do try to speak out. So it's trying to have a system where this can be reported, it can be analyzed, and you're not ruining your career by saying that, aliens have, where I've seen something that I can't explain, in my expertise as a pilot. And so I thought it was, it wasn't nearly as salacious, I guess, as the initial one where you're talking about, this vast reverse engineering program and alien bodies and all of that. But it was kind of steps where, the Oversight Committee is focused on it and they are slowly building up this program. The AARO now exists for it, but people are very critical of the AARO. So seeing, will Congress succeed in kind of partitioning, some sort of resources for these programs and then some sort of legal framework that helps protect whistleblowers that want to report out on it.
Mm-hmm. I guess I just feel like there are too many alternative explanations for all the video evidence that's been shown.
I mean, I think that's a big challenge of it because, you're trying to sort the wheat from the chaff. Probably more apt is like finding the needle in the haystack because the majority of UAPs are probably in going from order of most likely to least likely. I mean, a large number are just ordinary misconceptions, balloons, satellites, atmospheric phenomenon. And then, the other stuff, obviously, U.S. has black projects with cutting edge aerospace programs, flying in these different areas where Air Force bases are, or they're not even informed, like our average pilot wouldn't necessarily be informed.
Right,
of, like a top secret project flying around. I think less likely adversarial drones and surveillance platforms. Obviously, we saw with the Chinese balloon, those things happen. But then you still have a small but stubborn residue of these cases that can't be explained. And that's where kind of the resources of like a
I don't know that they can't be explained.
No, there's plenty of incidences. I don't even think necessarily the one that they show in the video is conclusively explainable. I mean, that's why it was shown.
Well, not conclusively explained, but there are alternative explanations.
There are, but you have to dedicate like resources to it for the analysis. Because with a thing like a drone, you're collecting more than just the visual evidence. There's like sensors and things. But, time is money and it takes time to analyze these things. I think the other thing that the UAP community would like to see is transparency around that data. So it's not just, it becomes more of a scientific process. And that was something kind of emphasized throughout the hearing is that, we need evidence and then it should be subject to peer review so that the government releases this evidence, which obviously the Defense Department, this is where the pushback comes from because, a lot of this stuff is classified as secret or, comes from combat or sortie operations or whatnot.
I mean, especially though, if it's a couple of those explanations, U.S. black projects or even foreign incursions, the Defense Department.
Yeah, but don't you just come out and say that without revealing the details?
No.
You just say,
no.
This is a classified, this is U.S. made. You at least say, hey, this is U.S. made and it was classified.
Maybe you don't want your adversaries to know that.
That's why this issue is tricky. And I don't blame people for wanting to put resources into it.
Yeah.
And understanding it better.
I just think the government would know if it's their own projects or not, or potentially their own projects. And that might...
Oh, well, yeah, they would know that. They would know their own projects.
That might be part of why they haven't released data.
Well, if we have stuff that is apparently breaking the laws of physics, then that's pretty impressive.
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, it's not like I don't believe aliens exist. I think they probably do, but have they...
You say the odds of them visiting our quadrant of the galaxy are low.
Very.
Yeah. That certainly seems possible. But anyway, I give Congress a thumbs up, one of my rare thumbs up for keeping on this issue and dedicating some resources to it. So.
Sure. Okay. I'll give you that, sort of. So in our first discussion, the Gaza Peace Plan that just came out this week, I thought The Economist had the best sort of just quick summary of it. So I'm just going to read that. So the principles are clear, but even if the sequencing and details are not. So the hostages would be released almost immediately. Hamas leaders and fighters would disarm and be granted amnesty or exile. A technocratic administration that includes Hamas would take over, supervised by an international board under Mr. Trump, which sounds like will be run by Tony Blair, actually. The Israeli army would withdraw from Gaza in stages, handing security to an international force and newly vetted Palestinian police. In the long run, the rehabilitation of Gaza and reforms to the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank could yet lead to statehood. 8 Muslim countries, including the main Arab powers and Turkey, backed the deal. One of the interesting things also that came out of this, first I have to say, Hamas has not signed on to the agreement. And if it doesn't, since this is such a internationally backed plan, that creates a lot of problems and probably gets rid of a lot of sympathy for what's going on in Gaza. But what's kind of notable is Tony Blair kind of coming out and being the person who's supposed to implement this plan, right? Because Trump can't manage the day-to-day operations. And apparently Blair and Trump are friends, which is kind of weird to me. And Blair is trying to still resurrect his legacy, which was seriously damaged in promoting the invasion of Iraq. Mm-hmm. And you liked Tony Blair's argument during that time because he was all about the democratization of Iraq. And you were like, how can you be against that?
Well, I mean, one, he provided the service of after WMDs didn't work out, that we needed some other reason to be there. And he was there. I mean, the thing with Tony Blair is, I mean, he's optimist in kind of that best liberal tradition of West can be this force for good within the world and the universalist kind of ideals. And I think he genuinely believed it. I don't think it was like a cynical play or something to cover it because, I mean, his legacy's been destroyed because of it. I mean, the smart political ploy would have been like to abandon that as soon as leaving office or something. I mean, something to try to back off of that.
But to a certain extent, the naivety of that causes real damage.
Yeah, it was extraordinarily naive. I think it also put a huge amount of trust, and the same trust that I put in, that the U.S. was far more capable because of historic precedents than what was.
Yeah, but you're going back to like World War II or something.
Yeah, but that was the same thing in our ally. I mean, that's the reason the U.K. and other allies came in, is they thought that the U.S. had a plan and that plan with the right cajoling could potentially work. I mean, again, I don't think he's doing this as a cynic. I think he's doing this as...
I don't think he's cynical either. I think he is truly, and that kind of gets into my other... First, it should be noted that he did negotiate the Northern Ireland Accords.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
he has a record of... Yeah.
But he's also been involved for a long time in Palestinian negotiations over a state, but he's never really been embraced among the Palestinians themselves. So he never shook the perception among Palestinians that he was tilted in Israel's favor. Far from being a force multiplier and brokering a deal between the two sides, the organization he was part of was often a bystander to those talks. And by the time he stepped down as envoy in 2015, he had ceased to be much of a presence in the peace process. And basically, the Palestinians said, good riddance. So this is a big problem because he lacks credibility with the Palestinians themselves.
That's true. But I mean, they're in a much different situation that they were in that time, and that they essentially have one, Gaza's devastated. I mean, this is basically like World War II levels of just complete devastation of the area and desperation. Hamas is enormously unpopular. I think they did do a poll with, I don't know if it was Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza, but yeah, the majority were 30%, 33% wanted the Palestinian Authority, which of course has been enormously ineffective and corrupt in itself. But another 25% supported foreign rule for a period of time with a transition.
Well, if that would stop the bombing, I probably would support it.
Yeah, and I think that's the idea. I mean, I think what's interesting is, I mean, my take from the article is that this is actually Tony Blair's plan that kind of the Trump administration globbed onto. And Tony Blair had put himself in the position that Trump has as part of the plan. But like Trump took it. And obviously you need U.S. backing for it to succeed and to get Israeli buy-in. But essentially, this is Blair's plan. This is kind of, he had like a 21-point plan, and Trump came out with a 20-point plan.
Yeah, well, it was a 21-page plan, the article said.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Not points. But no, it sounds like it was largely taken from that. What's interesting, I mean, I think we have to talk about why Netanyahu agreed to this plan when he hasn't agreed to others. And I wonder if all these European states and Canada recently recognizing Palestine as a state put any pressure on him. Obviously, probably the biggest source of pressure is his own lack of popularity. But despite that, he certainly has resisted plans before. So why do you think he took this deal?
Yeah, I think it's without a doubt the bombing of Qatar. So the recent bombing
the
of
US put enough pressure
Qatar,
on
the
him.
U.S., I mean, Trump came out strongly against that, and that led to a break. And just in general, polling within the U.S., I mean, Israel's losing a lot of support from kind of like the average American in this current plan because of the situation in Gaza. So I think that's what's caused them to come to the table because, I mean, Trump basically came out, and unlike the plan in February with the AI video and Trump Riviera on Gaza, that now it's that he came out against Israel, the full takeover of both the West, basically the full ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people from all territory, which is very much, the goal of the far right allies of Likud within Israel.
Yeah, so I thought this was pretty notable. I think if it succeeds, Trump deserves credit for it. He did something, I mean, probably the timing had a lot to do with it, what Israel's been doing, but he's done something that Biden didn't do.
Yeah, I mean, I think it has a very low chance of success. But if it does, absolutely. I mean, I think it because it showed enforced movement from an Israeli position that definitely Netanyahu has full motivation to keep the war going. And everything pushing from his far right coalition would be for this as well. And it's also pushing back internally against, I mean, because isn't it Huckabee that's like the ambassador to Israel? Yeah. I mean, he's been pushing. It's the whole, we're not even going to refer to Palestine. We're going to refer to it as the biblical names of, these different Israeli territories. Yeah, you have the certain part of the evangelical right that just fully embraces the ethnic cleansing of other remaining Palestinian territory. So seeing Trump like push back and it's kind of embrace a two-state or the framework for a two-state solution again.
I mean, such a dramatic difference than, like you said, in February.
Yeah, so I think it is. I think, again, with Trump, you can always count on that corruption and the huge amount of money that they've made from the Gulf states, through personal family deals and crypto and real estate. And that's across the board. That's Kushner's, that's everybody. Everybody's cashing in on that sweet, sweet Middle East corruption. But it plays out in this way where you listen to what the Gulf states, because you need the Gulf states on board, for any sort of solution. And in this case, it kind of pays off.
Yeah.
I mean, the actual implementation of this, because there are a lot of comparisons of Iraq. There's, of course, from the left, it's like, oh, this is just a colonialist enterprise. And, oh, you're putting in the people who carved up this territory in the first place, the UK, symbolically as Tony Blair in charge as viceroy of Gaza to operate this. Given that the Gulf states have bought in, given the way that it's kind of structured, given the absolute devastation and the desperation of the people that you're trying to rule over, unlike Iraq, which was, was surgical strikes, you had a population in place, and then you unemploy like the entire Iraqi military.
Right. You do a lot of things.
Yeah, you do a lot of things to put yourself in a bad situation. So I didn't buy into those comparisons, even though that's natural because of Tony Blair's historic involvement.
Do you think he should get a Nobel Peace Prize for this?
Only if it succeeds, not like you give it to him because...
Certainly they've given it to people working on this issue who did not succeed before.
That's true. I think it should be a joint thing then with Trump and Blair.
I think it's interesting. I mean, I think he has a case for like, why are they not giving me the Peace Prize? Because certainly Arafat got the Peace Prize. It didn't work out.
Yeah, but I mean, you had an extended period of peace, right?
Yeah. Well, I guess it will.
Between infidades.
If it works or not, but...
Yeah. I think, let's say 2 years down the line, this is in place, hasn't been any fighting, and it seems to be going well, then, you give it to them as like a farewell. Well, I mean, unless they're going into third term, but...
So hopeful. I have to say, it's interesting because in general, I do not think highly of Trump's foreign policy and find it disturbing in many. But it has, I don't know, he's been in the position to succeed or may potentially succeed in something that's been very intractable. And I think we have to give him some credit for that.
No, I go back to what we said, I think the lead up before his inauguration. I said the Middle East is the one place where I think he's going to be gold. and be, significantly better than the Biden administration. And that's proven the case. I mean, of course, this is coming from a pretty centrist position. I mean, anybody on the left would be like, no, this dude's enabled genocide in Gaza. Yeah. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
What they done is horrific. But
what they have done is horrific.
I mean, it's Israeli policy.
Right.
Yeah, we haven't stepped in to intervene nearly enough.
Yeah.
So I don't know. But no, I think if this works, I mean, you look at the situation, if you can get back to a two-state solution and have an enormously weakened Iran and normalization of relations with Saudi Arabia and Israel, then strategically, U.S. is in a much better position within the region.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Yeah.
So, that's an unusually uncharacteristic positive news from us.
See, that's two. That's two right there. UAPs, UFOs, Republican Congress doing good.
This whole episode is...
Yeah, see, nobody can say we're biased here.
Sure. We're not biased. We just see the facts. So another big news, this happened this week, was U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent talking about negotiations underway for a $20 billion swap line with Argentina's central bank.
Yeah, so just providing a little background on Argentina over the last couple of years, because Argentina is certainly no stranger to economic crises. Basically, this country's been in one economic crisis after another for like 40, 50 years. Mm-hmm. In fact, one of the funny things that Paul Krugman mentioned in his Substack article was that his wife's dissertation in 1980 was on the Argentinian debt crisis. Mm-hmm. So this country is a bit of a mess. So it's certainly saying, I mean, at least they're, I guess, attempting something again to turn it around. That's what kind of led to the election of the libertarian and kind of right-wing hero, Javier Milei, who was elected in late 2023 to implement an economic stabilization plan for the country, which, as most countries coming out of COVID experienced a significant inflation, it being Argentina, it like peaked close to 300% inflation. Mm-hmm. So just absolute brutal. So Milei came in, he implemented a pretty strict austerity program. So it was a program of deregulation, very steep spending cuts, which included subsidies for medicine and for transportation for the average Argentinian citizen, dismantling capital controls, and then also trying to support a stronger peso, essentially in order to get inflation under control. And, that seemed to work for the first year. So inflation came down from its peak of close to 300% to about 50%. And GDP growth in the first quarter this year hit 6%. So by the time Milei appeared at the CPAC conference in February 2025, he was being hailed as a hero. And I'm sure we all remember the pictures of Elon with the chainsaw. I forgot at the time, the chainsaw was a gift from Milei that he gave in order to, because Milei campaigned with the chainsaw. It's like, I'm going to cut all of these, welfare, Peronist subsidies away.
Those are all facts I was unaware of.
Yeah. So then you get all the goofy pictures of Elon in February 2025, right at the start of the Doge efforts with his chainsaw, which all went really, really well, as we know. But since then, what you've seen is that unemployment has actually hit a 4-year high within Argentina at 8%. And the real exchange rate has actually led to Argentinian industry becoming much less competitive. And that's led to panic within the markets and a huge capital flight. So that's kind of the background and the situation that led to Bessent announcing this $20 billion swap line.
This is a swap line.
I think it's allowing them, it's giving the U.S. Treasury will purchase pesos.
Oh, okay, for dollars.
Yeah, so that because they're running out of, to defend the peso, they're running out of foreign currency.
Right.
Yeah. So according to the economists, the move doesn't appear to be necessarily urgent financial crisis. It's not that they're on this point of collapse or something. Right. But is more politically driven because Milei's party seems in significant trouble. They saw a number of losses in local elections in Buenos Aires. They've also, Congress, where he does not have the majority, has actually been able to override his vetoes. So some of the additional austerity measures have failed within the Argentinian Congress. And then probably most importantly, there's a midterm election coming up October 27th. So that was really seen as the driving force for the intervention, is that we need to prop up
just such a disturbing use of federal tax dollar money. I mean, it's one thing. I mean, the only other comparison that the U.S. has done before was bailing out Mexico during the Clinton administration. And that happened right after NAFTA. Trade is very important with Mexico, where trade is not important with Argentina at all.
Right, yeah.
We're far behind China and the EU in terms of our trade with who they trade with. So it's not significant. The circumstances are completely unlike Mexico. And of course, Clinton was heavily criticized for doing that for Mexico. So yeah, it's a very disturbing use of foreign policy to support your allies.
Okay, yeah, but what about the idea of, okay, if we are establishing this new Monroe Doctrine and we're focusing on South America and we've lost grounds in recent years, like in Colombia and in Brazil in terms of national elections and parties favorable to the U.S., doesn't it make sense then to intervene to stanch the bleeding against China within South America by propping this guy up and ensuring that you have a very favorable regime to the U.S. in place?
Not really. I mean, it might be something you want to do more infrastructure in these countries, including Argentina, projects that would presumably help the people of Argentina. But there's no guarantee that
but they have to get, and Krugman himself admits, he's like, I don't know how to fix it because this problem's been going on 40 years.
Right.
And in some ways, things were improving. But what about the idea, because they're also pushing full dollarization, which of course means they lose the ability of...
which should be a mistake.
Fiscal control, but then they have inflation under control because not everybody's like abandoning their currency constantly.
The problem is you then have no control over responding to economic crisis.
You depend on the Fed. Then.
Right. Where the Fed is only
Fed's not going to listen to it. Right. Don't care what you do.
So why most countries, I feel like there's some islands or something like that may be dollarized, but very few countries have gone as far to dollarize despite having severe economic problems. It just has the potential to solve inflation, but exacerbate other economic problems in the country.
Yeah.
And certainly no flexibility in controlling unemployment or other important issues.
Yeah, I can see that. But at the same time, it's like, I mean, Argentina struggled this for half a century.
Yeah.
And giving them a lifeline, because they have lifelines from the IMF.
Right,
it's just
gave them a bailout,
the amounts were not enough. And the criticism has been that they've been blowing through this money on various programs. I think the other thing that's hurt Milei is that there is deep corruption, I think, from his sister.
Oh yeah, that's what I think Krugman or someone else, or maybe two articles talked about, is kind of spurning this crisis.
Yeah,
is Milei's increasing unpopularity, hurting the economy, hurting people's faith in him. Thus, all these dollars were fleeing Argentina with the idea that the peso, which is considered to be still overvalued, was going to go down in value. So a lot of people have all their savings in dollars because of the inflationary problems on the peso. So they started sending their dollars out of the country, which then actually fulfills that concern by putting pressure downwards on the peso.
Yep.
I thought that was interesting, the circular. But yes, that was in part sparked by this corruption of his sister.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's definitely, influenced the unpopularity. And the midterms really will be. And that's why the Trump administration is kind of putting in these efforts, because the local elections were in Buenos Aires. He was never popular, like in Buenos Aires. All these populist parties are not popular in the cities. They're popular in the rural areas. The other thing that was interesting that was reported from an independent journalist was some of the ties Besant has to hedge funds within the U.S. that have made like gigantic bets on the Argentinian economy, basically betting that, purchasing bonds, during that period of like high inflation, and went really well, like during 2024. But apparently, this hedge fund manager, Rob Citrone, who's actually a part owner of the Pittsburgh Steelers, has worked with Bissett for 20 years. And Bissett actually credits him for a trade that they made back in the, I think, 2010s around the Japanese yen that made Bissett hugely rich. So there could be a very strong conflict of interest where U.S. policy is being shaped also, not only because it's politically convenient, but also you have key power players that stand to lose a lot of money if the Argentinian economy goes under. So seeing some sort of intervention, I mean, just verbally saying it, because I don't think the money's been enacted yet.
They're saying it's being
negotiated, but just saying it, the market kind of stabilized for a period of time. But to your point, the fact that it's 30% overvalued, it's going to be under pressure, and especially in the lead up to the midterms. So the Treasury is likely going to have to actually get some pesos.
Yeah. So, like I said, I find it a little disturbing because a lot of this, it's really interesting to contrast Argentina and Brazil. Brazil could offer even more benefits. Trade is more beneficial than Argentina, but Trump doesn't like the trial of Bolsonaro, the conviction of Bolsonaro. Yeah. And one way that I thought was interesting, because people are going to now hear a lot about critical minerals because I just took over the critical minerals industrial study. So less drones and killer robots, but more about critical minerals. But Brazil is a huge source that would really benefit the U.S. against reducing its reliance on China. But these trade negotiations with Brazil have really hampered what the U.S. can do. Whereas with Argentina, they recently signed a memo of understanding. I do think Argentina's stance against China does really come into play with this. And maybe I'll be able to say more when I go to Argentina, if that happens this year.
Yeah, you're going to be able to do real kind of on the field reporting and research from...
Yeah, I'm sure just hanging around critical mineral sites will...
You're going to be in the cities too, right? Are you going to go to Buenos Aires? Or? Yeah, there you go. Yeah, who knows what will be going on in March, right? March, April?
April.
Yeah, midterms will be long over. So he'll either be kind of lame duck and in a lot of trouble, and the economy may be wrecked. But yeah, so that'd be interesting. But I think the other point is that there's not a unified consensus within MAGA on this either. There's been major pushback, I think, particularly from the agricultural community. And do you want to talk some about the soybean farmers? And
well, that's the particular group that is having the biggest problem with this, in that because of the trade wars with China, and this actually started during Trump's first trade war, China's stopped buying a lot of American soybean and buying instead Brazil and Argentina. I actually knew about Brazil. I didn't realize Argentina was another source of soybeans. So the farmers feel like this will even cut into further their exports. And basically, once you lose this market, I mean, it's not like the trade war, negotiations happen and you can get that market back. So basically, they're being very hurt by this move and are definitely protesting it. I don't know how much soybean farmers are really going to affect MAGA decisions or Trump decisions. Now, he is planning a big bailout to soybean farmers because of how much they have been hurt.
Yeah, I mean, it's half of their crop between China. Well, yeah, between the loss of the China market is half of their...
Right. But they've already lost that. This puts further pressure, but I don't think that this group is significant enough to really alter policy. Like I said, Trump will give them a bailout. He's already talked about giving them a bailout.
Yeah, and that's what he did in the first term too. I mean, he's saying, "Oh, we're going to use all the huge money we're getting from tariffs. We'll use for a bailout for our farmers." So,
were there other groups besides the soybean farmers?
No, it was primarily from the farmer perspective. I think is the biggest pushback. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, you may get some, the more isolationist wings on that just don't want U.S. involvement anywhere. And why are we giving money to any foreign country for anything? I haven't seen the poll numbers with the MAGA base, like how it's perceived. But it was interesting, so there was an anonymous quote that Politico reported on coming from within the White House staff.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good quote.
And it was saying, Milei is done politically. His sister is corrupt. His finance minister is an inside trader. And they have pissed away $15 billion in IMF money and $15 billion in central bank reserves, propping up a crap currency. And now Treasury wants American taxpayers to double down on stupid. So that was a good... Yeah, that was a good quote. But essentially, say Milei was a fraud and he came in, betrayed all conservatives and libertarians that supported him.
Yeah.
So, definitely big fractures probably within the White House on this staff as well, which then goes back to maybe the independent journalist is right. That this is just a bailout that, for buddies of Scott Bessent.
Yeah. Disturbing. If that is true, that is disturbing.
$20 billion, just chump change. You find that on the couch, right?
Why don't we apply the money to the ACA and Medicare, all that stuff that we cut?
And help Democrat voters? I don't think so. Which is not true, because it probably helps Republicans voters just as much, if not more. Yeah.
So for our last topic, we wanted to talk about the increasing illiberalization happening in Europe. We've mentioned this before, but recent events have revealed gaining support for these far-right parties. And there's genuine concern that this will hinder the EU project and even dissolve the EU potentially in general, particularly because we're seeing support for these parties in countries like Germany and France, which are the two key pillars of the EU.
Yes, I think there's definitely been consternation in European circles around the growing popularity of these parties and kind of the very similar crises that more centrist parties are facing and their seemingly inability to resolve these situations, which is largely, a jobs crisis, economic growth crisis, inflation, and a migration crisis kind of all going on. So what's been seen, I'd say, over the last couple of months is that in all of these key countries, the far-right parties are pulling ahead and polling, and these are for the national elections. And just to give an idea, this isn't something that these countries are facing immediately. Germany had its national election not that long ago. But nevertheless, the AfD, so the Alternative for Germany, which came out, I think both Musk and J.D. Vance have kind of supported, these parties as part of the greater MAGA project. They've pulled ahead of the Christian Democrats, 26% to 24% in the German system. National Rally in France has consistently led polls. I mean, Macron and his party is enormously unpopular. But France doesn't have a national election until 2027. And then most recently, the Reform Party in the UK has polled at a pretty astonishing 34% versus the current Labour Party's 22%.
That's very astonishing.
And this is despite the fact Reform Party, headed by Nigel Farage, only has 5 seats in the current parliament. Labour has a supermajority of 400 members within parliament, but they are enormously unpopular. A lot of people think that you may have something similar you saw with the Tories, where current prime minister gets booted in favor, just from an intra-party insurrection.
Possibly.
So I think that the two key events that happened recently that people kind of focus on is, one, there was a German municipal election in West Germany's North Rhine-Westphalia area. And this was the first election since Friedrich Merz's Christian Democratic Union formed a government in May. And what you saw was, gains for the AfD, which is actually the strongest in East Germany. But it took about 15% of the vote in this West German area, very industrial area. So it's been impacted by the high energy prices, as a result of the Ukraine war and the loss of German competitiveness, because you've seen a lot of industries that have had to close shop or move overseas. So this is kind of the heart of the industrial belt.
Right.
Maybe a future Rust Belt, similar to what we saw in our Midwest. So, the German economy just continues to struggle under these things. And it's something that Merz, who heads up a center-right government, I think their biggest push and the hope for stimulative activity is actually the increase in defense spending.
Yeah.
By trying to target, a much more substantial percentage of their GDP. The idea over time is that, you're kind of restoring some of these industries and some of the industrial capacity within Germany, and that in turn helps the economy.
It's interesting the ways that they are able to spend this increased defense spending. So I was listening to some people talk about how Italy is using like their increase in defense spending to build a bridge to Sicily or some like really crazy long bridge in the name of quotation marks national security.
Okay. And does that count towards your quota and your promise? Okay. Yeah, EU is really, because I know any aid you provide to the Ukraine counts, but then the idea that like building a bridge and infrastructure.
Yeah, I mean, it could be used. In detail,
the interstate system in the U.S. was built because of defense needs during the Gulf War. I guess you could.
Yeah, I mean, admittedly, this is what my students were talking about. I didn't research it or look it up myself, but it seems like it's pretty liberal is what can count. But I mean, that's stimulative, right? So
it is. Yeah. No, I'm sure. Well, I don't know. Between Sicily?
Yeah, something like that.
Isn't that a long way?
Yeah, it's supposed to be one of the longest bridges.
Okay, so it's kind of like the Key West, whereas this is like a 10, 20-mile bridge.
This is what I heard. I probably should have looked it up before I brought this up, but so, if I Google it, it was one of the first results that came up.
Okay.
Yeah, so a proposed bridge connecting the mainland Italy to Sicily via the Strait of Messina could be funded under NATO's defense spending guidelines due to its strategic military importance.
There you go.
But following objections from U.S. officials and pressure from NATO, that they have confirmed that this will be funded entirely with state resources and not use any of the defense funds.
Even Moroni, ally of the Trump administration, can't get like a solid on.
Yep.
Man. Well, that's surprising. Okay, well, going back, so the other event that happened was a gigantic rally within London on September 13th, the Unite the Kingdom rally. So this rally was organized by individual Tony Robinson, which is a far-right activist known for kind of nationalist and anti-immigration views. I guess he became famous in the 2010s as the founder of the English Defense League, which was an anti-Islam street protest movement. And he's had a pretty contentious relationship with Nigel Farage, who we mentioned earlier as the head of the Reform Party, because Farage actually sees him as pretty toxic to the Reform Party's broader appeal. And he's kind of worried about association with Robinson could damage the legitimacy, especially if the UK heads into a general election. So this rally ended up attracting over 100,000 protesters. You may have seen, some of the pictures of it. Got pretty rowdy and violent at certain points, and actually resulted in 26 police officers being injured.
Why do they always say the left is violent when you have so much violence at these sort of events with the far right?
I don't get it, because it's normally, in the left, it's normally like criminal opportunists, so it's property that's getting damaged. And those sort of, when we think about it, it's really it's like the George Floyd protests, the BLM. That's what the right is just traumatized and obsessed about. Most of that was damages to private property.
Yeah, that's true.
The right, January 6th, events like this, Unite the Kingdom rally, it's like the police.
Yeah.
Which is pretty crazy, because the police are normally, pretty center right or themselves. So it's a little ridiculous. But it was a shock seeing, this number of people kind of combined with the popularity of Reform Party. So it really brings a challenge to the Labor government of how can they try to address immigration and this national identity and areas around free speech, which, of course, MAGA, famously, J.D. Vance at the beginning of the administration coming up and saying that the biggest threat to Europe was not Russia, on its border waging war against Ukraine, but was rather free speech oppression of the far right, within Germany and the UK was like the greatest threat to Europe. So that whole sentiment was, of course, reinforced by our best bud, Elon Musk, who, of course, had to make a special guest appearance on video screen, who's a big supporter of Tommy Robinson, who's actually a convicted felon. I mean, he had just gotten out of jail on various charges. Yeah, it was fraud. I don't think anything violent, although he is kind of seen as a street thug in general. But yeah, so Elon appeared, he called for the dissolution of parliament and an early general election. He also was leveraging the killing of Charlie Kirk, which had just occurred right before that event, that the left is the party of murder and that violence is coming for you and you either fight back or die. So really stirring the pot, in a pretty volatile situation. The UK government has looked to see if he violated, any sort of inciting violence sort of rules. And I don't think it raises to the level, because again, like our country, they have pretty high levels of free speech expression.
Yeah, I mean, the free speech, and I was listening to someone talk about this, and it's interesting because ours is based on their principles of free speech, but they're not as guaranteed as ours, right? So that's some of the criticism by Elon and these groups, that free speech has been oppressed. But yeah, I wouldn't expect any charges. But this rally is pretty disturbing. And this rhetoric that I keep hearing on the right, that you need to fight back from liberals when there's no evidence of liberals being violent, but creates this sort of violent mindset in the far right, in this country and in Europe.
I mean, yeah, unfortunately, it is this almost dehumanization of your political opponents. It's this constant siege mentality, which is kind of crazy, particularly in this country where they hold all the levers of power, but are still the victims of some sort of nefarious force, the deep state, global elites, whoever that is constantly oppressing them, oppressing their speech, despite having all the actual power.
Right.
So yeah, it's just this constant victim mentality. And obviously the idea is, to try to export this model as much as possible. Even though, MAGA is kind of this supposed America first, kind of isolationist streak to it, I think it's always had this globalist. And before it was led by Steve Bannon, we talked about previously kind of his efforts during the first Trump administration and during the early part of Biden of, traveling to like Italy, working with before Moroni kind of gained power, certain parties there, certainly with Nigel Farage and with Kurt Wilders and the Netherlands, all these kind of individuals. But you can see, they are making this concerted push. And I think that the biggest evidence of that was actually a memo that was released by the State Department.
Yeah, I found this really disturbing, the quote that you had.
On May 27th, which was entitled The Need for Civilizational Allies in Europe. So the memo argues that Europe is undergoing democratic backsliding, mass migration, digital censorship, and erosion of religious freedom, which it claims is a direct threat to Western civilization and U.S. national security. And then it goes on and it frames the U.S. as needing to partner with selected European civilizational allies, which are mostly right-wing nationalists or conservative governments, which it has cast as defenders of Christian heritage, family values, and traditional Western culture, of which it specifically mentions Hungary as cited as an example of a Christian nation aligned with that vision. The memo then goes on, criticizes mainstream European institutions and parties as complicit in undermining this heritage, labeling them as anti-civilization or hostile to the shared Western civilizational heritage.
This may seem kind of weird or random, but whenever I read stuff about the sort of globalist movement from MAGA, just reminds me of like communism, which I guess fascism is the opposite of communism in many ways, but sort of this global ideology. Communism was fundamentally supposed to be global. It wasn't supposed to be national Russia or China. It was supposed to be a rise up of global. And I don't know, it just seems like a lot of the arguments are not the same as communism, but they certainly, that universalist appeal. I don't know. Maybe it's just studying too much history, but
No, I think you're absolutely right. And we talked about before in previous conversations where you have at CPAC or these other events, you always have like an international element and coordination with parties that are kind of sympathetic to these views. So yeah, they don't have a full international like communism did, where you have like meeting of all the global communists together, especially like in the 20s and 30s. But I think they're on their way to that. I mean, this is definitely a cohesive view that believes the nation state is supreme, believes in kind of the idea, and this is the whole idea of pushing back, and J.D. Vance is a leader of this, of pushing back of the United States as a kind of how it was framed in the Enlightenment as a symbol, as this idea, it's more of an idea rather than a place. And that's what made us so successful in terms of accepting immigrants from around the world, because it's the idea of America as opposed to...
And important in fighting communism in the Cold War to make this argument.
Yeah, you had to have something universalist because communism was giving you a similar universalist appeal to it. It doesn't matter what your race, religion, or creed is, embrace the struggle of the proletariat against these oppressive capitalist colonialist governments. So you needed to have some sort of model that had a similar, universal appeal to it, and that provided better material benefits than communism does, which clearly did. So yeah, it is concerning because, again, going back to the J.D. Vance thing is, he comes out, he does a speech about blood and soil. Not in those exact words, but the idea that, America's this physical place founded by white Northern Europeans with white Northern European Christian ideals, and that is America, and that there could be no other definition of America, and that if you don't fit to that definition of America, then you're not an American.
Right, if you're not a white male Christian.
You're not a true American then, yeah.
Which, our founding fathers, many of them would not fit into that description, so I guess they would not be real Americans either.
No, certainly. Well, Jefferson wouldn't be.
Right.
I mean, the guy was a theist. He was like blacking out most of the things within the Bible. And
he wrote about religious freedom and even freedom for Muslims.
Famous, yeah. Yep.
Yeah. I don't think Franklin would fit into that either.
No.
He was kind of...
I'd say every intellectual that actually composed our documents, as opposed to some of the guys that just signed it.
Yeah.
No, none of them would fit.
So... What I find disturbing, too, is like holding Hungary as an example of, because on one hand, they're like democratic backsliding. And if there's a country that is notable in Europe for democratic backsliding and illiberalism, it would be Hungary, which has curbed religious rights, freedom of speech, gone after political enemies. I mean, it's very disturbing.
I mean, it's pathetic, too. It's a second-rate, one of the poorest countries within the EU, and you're holding up this little backwater country with all of these issues as like a model for the United States of America. Yeah. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. But it's clearly, I mean, before kind of the pushback against Jimmy Kimmel, a lot of people were making the comparison of, this is what Viktor Orban did. Right. And obviously a much smaller media environment than the United States, but it was a similar consolidation of, any sort of media that prevented or presented oppositional views to Fidesz, to the ruling party. And that you were seeing, this capitulation within the U.S. media players as well. Part of it just wanting to wait, think they can just outweight the Trump administration. And then some of it just out of, sheer cowardice.
And then the other thing that's disturbing is criticizing mainstream European institutions as being complicit in undermining this heritage. So labeling things like the EU and other institutions like that as this anti-civilizational or hostile to the shared Western civilization heritage. I mean, this all came out. The EU came out of the European Steel Commission, which was an agreement between Germany and France that the U.S. pushed really hard to sort of prevent those two countries from going to war again. This grew to the EU, which is a very powerful economic institution, I would say, more than political institution. But all these institutions in general that have upheld Western liberal values, right? They're attacking is this anti-civilizational, they want a Huntington argument where it's like pure Christianity against, I don't know, this China-Islam alliance that Huntington has. I don't know. It's very disturbing and very concerning to see the rise of these parties who have the ability to affect the governance of the EU.
Yeah, and I think that kind of brings us back around to kind of the current state. And, how dangerous are these far-right parties within kind of the core Western European countries, so France, Germany, and the UK. So there was a good podcast. I will provide a link to it. It's called The Rest is Politics. It's hosted by Rory Stewart, who was a former MP within the Conservative Party, and then Alistair Campbell, who's kind of the equivalent to James Carville, but for Tony Blair during that period. So he was like his communications guru and political strategist. And they talked a lot about these developments, particularly within Germany, but also the Unite the Kingdom protest. And, a lot of the discussion was around that, liberal democracies are currently vulnerable, that they've been too slow and cautious, and it creates, opportunities for these far-right actors, particularly around economics, around migration, which, of course, Germany was triggered by the crisis in Syria. I mean, it led to a huge, then Merkel agreed to allow in a very large number of Syrian refugees. And that, of course, has really kicked off the rise of the far right. So these parties have had kind of these weak responses around that. So that makes them vulnerable from the right. And then from the left, they've also had weak responses around things like Gaza and around the energy shocks. I mean, we've been basically buffered from, increases in energy prices because of what's going on in Ukraine, but Europe's been absolutely hammered. So there's a true cost of living crisis, much greater than the US, which is not good here either. But it's, how can liberal democracy be more self-sustaining? And they kind of point, you have to strengthen the civic institutions. You have to get a lot better at the narratives. I think that's the problem with both the Democrats currently here and definitely with Labour in the UK, is that they have really poor communicators now. Trump is an absolute master communicator. And the right-wing ecosystem, well, he's an entertainer.
Rambly speeches, right?
Yeah, but what I'm saying. He is engaging.
I think his allies are great communicators, too.
But he also, it's just the sheer volume of it. He dominates every space. Yeah. I mean, he's never not, he inserts himself into every single event, every single thing. He just dominates it by, even if what he's saying is incoherent. He dominates it. That's what I'm saying.
He's pretty incoherent. I think people like Vance really articulate the vision. And just a lot of the people out there who are promoting this underlying ideology, which I don't think Trump could specifically. But he does. He does have the populist, appeal. I get that. But I just also kind of laugh at. I get what you're saying, but it also makes me want to laugh because listening to Trump
it is combined with the entire ecosystem and the fact that, now that podcast, funny enough, have become this major force within politics, the right dominates it completely. So there's a lack of voices, even though, they'll still, again, playing victim. They'll be like, the mainstream, nobody listens to the mainstream media. Nobody watches the news. Nobody watches. CNN's ratings are maybe you have 300,000 people. You look at the ratings for CNN is really? Now, it's 300,000, 400,000 people. Wow. Then you go on YouTube and you're like, this guy has 10 million viewers.
Yeah.
Nobody's watching these things. So they dominate these spaces and they dominate the communication. That's something these centrist parties are just getting nuked on. I mean, it's the same with Nigel Farage, because he's just an entertaining, engaging guy like Trump. He dominates, even BBC coverage, even though that's government owned. BBC, because people are entertained by it. And it's just become such an entertainment, racket that... So everything that I've listened to is sort of you need to become better communicate. You can have superior plans, superior ideas for how to structure a society. But if you can't communicate them effectively, then you're dead.
It's interesting, I think, on that, just to briefly, I just keep thinking, why can't Democrats articulate a vision? And I think part of, like, they're so worried about offending the middle, but the right, who does win the middle sometimes, is not worried about offending. They play to their own home crowd. Sometimes I wonder if, not that I agree with it, but if their message was a little bit more to the left, if Democrats would have a more appealing vision or communication.
I think it's difficult because maybe unlike Europe, I mean, this is fundamentally a center-right country. Yeah. You only have like so big. I mean, you see it like in Trump's poll numbers that he'll never drop below 30% because that's fundamentally the right wing will never be anything other than the right wing. But Democrat numbers, I guarantee you could, if you take a far left position, maybe that's 15, 20% of the country. That's a much smaller percentage of the country.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, just though populism, even like Clinton, who was a centrist, really was able to find a sort of populist message in the economy. And the Democrats don't seem to.
Yeah, but what did he actually implement that was?
No, he didn't implement anything populist. No.
He basically did what Republicans wanted, but then when he embraced it, they had to go further to the right to like distinguish themselves.
Yeah,
that's the whole.
He wasn't a populist, but he found a kind of populist message in his campaign.
Yeah, well, I mean, just his background allowed him to be a populist. I mean, he's a country boy from Arkansas. You're definitely not part of the elite circles of George H.W. Bush coming from Yale and Connecticut.
Right. Very different.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I just keep thinking about it. Why is it so hard? I think it's hard to have a centrist message.
And it's hard now for the Democrats because they don't have a national leader. I mean, there's no clear national leader now, and one won't emerge until the primaries in 2027, 2028.
But even before you had, when Obama came out, like, he wasn't a national leader, but he was articulating, and quite beautifully, a powerful message for the left, for the Democrats.
Yeah, and maybe that's why you get so much, just the fact that I guess the media is all focused around Zidane, the guy running for mayor in New York.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, there is like Bernie and Zidane.
Yeah, they're definitely, AOC may end up running for Senate in New York because Schumer's enormously unpopular. Obviously, we haven't mentioned, our former Governor Newsom, the great state of California, who's been just doing a full-on troll campaign for the last 2 months.
But Newsom is like inherently a centrist, even though he's not portrayed as
He won't be portrayed as a centrist.
No, and he doesn't want to be labeled as that, but he is inherently a centrist.
I agree. I mean, I had, my former company had dealings when he was lieutenant governor, and at the time, he was seen as very pragmatic, very business friendly, because he was like a business owner in San Francisco, very successful business owner, was very middle of the road, pragmatic sort of dude. Two things, one, he saw the opportunity, to run for national office, and the idea if you're going to be in a primary with Democrats, you're going to need to veer further to the left. And then two, I think he was personally impacted by the fires within California, and that caused him to embrace the more in a much harder way, the environmental movement, take a much stronger line within the state. Yeah.
That's interesting. Anyway, I don't want to dwell too much on U.S. politics, but I think this idea of why we can't find a message here reflects the larger problem of the left trying to find a message that's as appealing as the sort of far-right populism.
Yeah. So it's interesting seeing the parallel. It's interesting seeing the same struggles that you have kind of domestically are the same that center and left parties have abroad as well.
The economics, is a global phenomenon. And it hit the EU worse because of the war and energy prices. We could go into detail about some, Germany increasing competition from China, not being able to sell as much to China. That has a lot to do with it as well. But I think everybody was
and then the UK, because of Brexit, headwinds. I mean, they shot themselves in the foot and they're just dealing with the consequences of shooting themselves. This is ironic
because, they're much less powerful now than they were before Brexit. But then you have Farage,
he's the one that led the Brexit initiative.
Yeah. I mean, so I don't think people necessarily understand how Brexit hurt the UK economy.
I think they did, but he's, again, a far superior communicator, and Ken Starmer is as bad as, well, maybe not as bad as Biden. Biden was horrible, but in terms of communication,
He might be as bad as Biden. I don't know.
The hope was that with the supermajority of Labor, that maybe Labor would land on some sort of message facing a tougher situation.
Right.
That if Labor could succeed in that message, then that's something the Democrats could actually use. But they are crashing bad.
Yeah. So you can't over-exaggerate it, but it's troubling trends.
Troubling trends, for sure. Yep.
All right. Well, I think this brings us to the end of this episode of Kellogg's Global Politics. You can visit our website at www.kellogg'sglobalpolitics and follow us on X at Global Kellogg or me, AR Kellogg.
And you can reach us by email, Anita at kellogg'sglobalpolitics.com, and myself, Ryan at kellogg'sglobalpolitics.com. As always, please see the show notes for the articles we discuss in this episode.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.